The Sigma FP is a thing of beauty. It's the world's smallest full-frame camera, and it produces a uniquely beautiful image that sets it apart from other mirrorless cameras on the market today. But it has a pretty big learning curve, especially when it comes to post-production. The file sizes, the CinemaDNG file format, and the slightly unusual color grading workflow in DaVinci Resolve take some getting used to. But once you know the ins and outs and add in a few tips and tricks that I've uncovered over the past few months of using it, you'll be creating beautiful images with this camera in no time. Hey everyone, Dylan here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk to you about color grading, specifically how I achieve the visual aesthetic that I'm looking for whenever I approach the grade on my Sigma FP projects. This little beast of a camera is my favorite creative tool at the moment, and one of the things I love most about it is how easy it is to grade, and also how quickly you can achieve a pleasing image with very little work in post once you know what to do. So today I'm going to take you through my entire Sigma FP workflow from start to finish. How I shoot, ingest, my project settings in DaVinci Resolve, and finally my simple 7-node structure that I use as a basis for nearly all my Sigma FP color grades. And make sure you stick around to the end because I'm going to let you in on how you can access some free Sigma FP clips of my own that you've seen in this and other videos so that you can practice these grading techniques on your own. You don't want to miss out on that. All right, let's dive right in. First things first, the footage I'm going to be grading today was shot at 4K UHD 12-bit CinemaDNG RAW at 30 frames per second. I shot in 30p most of the time that my wife Stephanie and I were on our recent vacation in Thailand because when conformed to 24, the slowdown itself is so subtle that it gives a kind of dreamlike quality to the footage that I really love. I really am pleased with how it made our Thailand memories look and feel. If you haven't seen the complete collection of my favorite memories from our recent trip to Thailand, I'll post a link to that video above. You should definitely check that out. Last thing before we jump into DaVinci Resolve and start color grading, I compress all my footage on ingest with a program called SlimRaw. SlimRaw is a nifty piece of software that you can pick up for about $60, and it will help greatly manage the massive file sizes that you get out of the Sigma FP by reducing them down to about 1/3 of their original size. I haven't noticed any difference in quality. I still get all the versatility and fidelity that I had seen in the uncompressed files, so it's definitely one you're going to want to pick up, definitely worth the money. Without further ado, let's jump into DaVinci Resolve and we can start color grading. All right, so here we are in DaVinci Resolve. We're on the color page. We have our Sigma FP clip here. It's a beautiful clip of my wife Stephanie on our last night in Thailand. And the first thing we're gonna do is come down to the RAW tab, and you'll access that by clicking on this far left icon towards the middle of the screen here. Now, the first thing you'll notice is that everything is grayed out. That's because we have decode using project selected. What you're gonna wanna do is hit this drop down, change it from decode using project to decode using clip, and then all of our different parameters are going to become available to us. The first of those parameters that we're going to change is our color space and gamma. Right now our highlights are blown, our blacks are crushed or nearly there, and you're not getting the dynamic range that one would expect from the raw files that the Sigma FP spits out. But we can change that, changing our color space from Rec 709 to Blackmagic Design. And instantly you see a whole bunch of detail has been brought back in our highlights. Our blacks are still pretty close to the bottom of the waveform, but we can fix that in our next step, which is to color correct this clip. The first thing I'm going to adjust in the RAW tab to color correct are the highlights before I adjust exposure. I typically always bring my highlights down all the way down as low as they can go. It's one of my favorite things about the controls you get for CinemaDNG in the RAW tab in DaVinci Resolve. After that, we're going to start to adjust our exposure and bring it up until we get to a level that's acceptable. Now, this is a sunset clip, so I'm going to keep the exposure a little low, just because it is supposed to be a little dark, a little moody, but that looks about right there. Quick pro tip, if you don't want to change the individual camera raw, color space, and gamma settings for every single Sigma FP clip in your project, you can change them once in your project settings and it will affect every Sigma FP clip in your project that way by default. You can access your project settings by hitting Shift-9 on your keyboard. That'll bring up the project settings window. Navigate down to your camera raw tab here on the left. Change your raw profile to CinemaDNG. Make sure decode using project is selected, and then change that color space and gamma setting just like you did for the individual clip. So you're changing color space to Blackmagic Design, making sure gamma is on Blackmagic Design film, and go ahead and make sure that highlight recovery is checked as well, so you get that bonus applied to all clips. And now whenever you go to the Camera Raw tab on any Sigma FP clip, your Blackmagic Design color space and gamma and highlight recovery options will already be selected. All right, moving on from the camera raw tab, our color correction is complete. Now we get into the grading. Now the first thing I'm gonna do is create those 7 nodes that I use as the basis for all my Sigma FP grades. So I'm gonna do that by pressing Option S to create a new node. I'm gonna do that 6 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm gonna clean up the node graph here, make sure it's nice and arranged. And those are the only 7 nodes I'm gonna use. This is all I need to get the results that I'm looking for. And I'll take you through what each one of these nodes is gonna be used for. The first thing we're gonna apply is an effect to the very last node, because the first thing we wanna do is change our color space from Blackmagic Design to Rec 709. Then you're gonna do that by going up to the effects here, searching for color space transform, dragging it onto our 7th node, and then inputting the correct input and output values for the clip. So I choose my input color space as Blackmagic Design Pocket 4K Film Gen 4 because I'm used to working in that with my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. And then my input gamma is gonna be the same as what I have in the camera raw tab for the clip Blackmagic Design Film. And the output color space is Rec 709. Gamma 2.4. I don't need to select it because that is the default color space selected for my project. So you see if I select it here, it's not going to change anything. It's doing it under the hood. But just so you guys know, your output color space is going to be Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. Just by applying that color space transform, a great deal of work has already been done to the clip. Here's where we started, and just by putting that color space transform node on there, the clip is already looking pretty good. So that's a really important step. It does a lot of the work for you, and it makes grading these clips that much easier. Now I'm going to come all the way to the beginning of our node tree. The first adjustment we're gonna make is using our primaries. So I'm gonna label this primaries, and I'm gonna come over to our primary wheels by selecting this button here and this leftmost button. And I'm gonna look at our waveform and adjust our lift, gamma, and game, or our shadows, midtones, and highlights as needed. We've already color corrected this clip using our raw tab, so there's not much more work to be done here, but I would like to spread out this waveform a bit so we get as much contrast in this image as we can. So I'm gonna raise the gain a little bit here, and then I'm going to adjust our midtones a tiny bit. I'm gonna bring the gain back down here. And there's really no one size fits all for this. It's whatever the clip calls for. So after my primary adjustments are done, the next thing we're gonna move on to is white balance. I'm gonna label this node WB, bring up my vector scope so I can see how I'm adjusting the overall balance of the image, and make small adjustments in the offset wheel, still on my primaries tab over here on the left. I'm gonna make small adjustments to the red, green, and blue values in this offset wheel to get the image a little bit more balanced. And I'm subtracting some green here, subtracting some red. I'm adding some more blue in, make that image a little cooler, maybe a tiny bit more red. And it's very subtle, but you see here, if I turn this off and on, the balance of my image on the vector scope has moved slightly. So next, after our white balance adjustments are complete, I'm gonna do a little bit of tone mapping. So I'm gonna label this next node in the tree here with tone, and I'm going to come over to our curves by clicking on this custom curves button here. I'm going to make sure that we're switching our scopes back over to the waveform so I can see the full luminance values of our image. And I'm going to start making points at various points along the curve line here, and then start to adjust them from shadows to highlights the way I see fit. So looking at the image, it is pretty nice and contrasty, but I'm going to want to bring up our midtones, where our skin tones lie, a little bit here in the middle, possibly move up our shadow dot here and pull down so we get a little bit more contrast between the lighter parts of our skin and the shadowy parts. Then, up towards the highlights here, I'm gonna bring up this little dot, make our sky pop, some of the highlights there, maybe a little bit darker on the shadows there. Right there, I think, that's all that image needs. So if I turn this off and on, we've added a little bit of pop, a little bit of contrast in the highlights and the ocean and the sky around our subject Stephanie here. We're moving on to our next node. I like to add a glow effect at this stage, so I'm gonna label this glow. And I'm gonna come over to the effects, search for the glow effect, apply that there. what we're gonna do first is switch our composite type for the effect over to soft light. Then we're gonna switch this top drop down to shiny regions so we can restrict the effect to the areas of the image, the brightest areas of the image, and not have it affect everything else. So I will manipulate this slider here until it affects mainly just the highlights or the areas that I want. Switch this back to glowing image, turn up the gain a little bit. You can see the glow around that light fixture there start to expand. Put the gain right about there. I'm gonna go a little bit more than I need because I'm going to blend this, bring the whole effect down and bring back some of the original image underneath it. So after I get the gain where I want, I'm gonna adjust this global blend parameter here by dragging this down. And you see I'm giving back some of the luminance of the image. All right, that looks great. So if I turn this off and on, you see we're just adding a little bit more contrast there, as well as a glow to some of the highlighted regions to boost what was already provided by the 1/8 Black Pro Mist filter. So that's it for our glow effect. Next, we're going to do a vignette. Obviously the focus of it is Stephanie in the center there, so we're just gonna do a typical oval vignette by clicking on our power window or a window tab here, selecting the circle and then dragging it out so that it covers our subject, and then feathering it out. Shift H will show me that I'm just affecting that area around Steph there. And then what I'm gonna do is invert this because I actually wanna affect just the areas around her. And so I'm gonna click on this button to invert the selection, and now I'm selecting everything outside of that power window. And I'm just gonna drag the gain down here. I'm gonna do it way too much, and then I'm gonna come back. And I think that is about where I need to be. Now, the shadows around the edges of this image are becoming a little bit too dark for me. So what I'm gonna do is go back to the camera raw tab actually and adjust our exposure up a little bit. We were at 1.2, I'm gonna bring it up to 1.5. And then I'm also gonna come back to our tone node here and adjust our shadow roll off at the low end. You see on the waveform that our shadows are kind of really getting close to the bottom value. They're nearly crushed on the left side of the image there. So I'm just gonna adjust this slider and just drag it up a bit until we start to get some of the detail back in those shadows. Not too far. So I guess 40 is about what we need here. Coming back to our vignette node, turn this off and on. You see, even that is just a little too much. So I'm gonna come back, adjust our gain up a slight bit. Okay, so after our vignette node is done, that's pretty much it. I will add a little bit of sharpening here at the end, and I'm gonna label that sharp. We'll come over to our blur and sharpen tab here, and just by adjusting the radius down by 1 or 2 points, I'm gonna go 2 points here, we'll add some sharpening, overall sharpening to the image. So that's it. 7 nodes, this is where we started. Blown highlights, almost crushed shadows, low dynamic range, just not a very pleasing image at all. And this is where we ended up with just 7 nodes and very little amount of work when all is said and done. Well, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. As promised, I'm gonna make this and other Sigma FP clips available to download for free via a Google Drive link in the description below. Go ahead and check those out. Please download, play around. If you're considering buying a Sigma FP, it's a great way to find out if, this is the workflow that you can support and if the camera is the right camera for you. Also, let me know if there's any other parts of the workflow that I didn't cover enough, you want more insight into. Would love to be able to provide more value for you guys on this channel, help you out, others who are struggling with Sigma FP operation or workflow or color grading in any way that I can. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button, give this video a thumbs up, it helps me out a lot, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this and other video production and color grading tutorials. Again, thank you so much for watching. My name's Dylan, and I'll see you next time. Bye.